What I'm about to tell you happened in Lagos, Nigeria, just 3 years ago. The police files are still sealed. The witnesses are still afraid to speak. But tonight, for the first time, you will hear the complete truth about Pastor John Miracle, the man who had everything, lost everything, and destroyed everything, all for money. Listen carefully to this story because it will shake your soul to its very foundation. In the heart of Lagos, where money flows like water and everyone dreams of making it big, there lived a man called Pastor John Miracle. And oh, how the people loved him, how they envied him, how they wished they could be just like him. Every Sunday morning, the massive Miracle Harvest Church overflowed with thousands of worshippers. The parking lot gleamed with Range Rovers, Mercedes-Benz, and Lexus cars. Inside the Golden Cathedral, Pastor John stood on his crystal podium, his designer suit sparkling under the lights, his Rolex catching the cameras as he raised his hands to heaven. "Somebody shout hallelujah!" he would boom, and the crowd would explode with praise. People traveled from Ghana, Benin, and Cameroon just to attend his services. Politicians sought his blessing. Billionaires knelt at his altar. His face was on every Christian magazine cover. His books topped bestseller lists. His television program, Miracle Hour with Pastor John, reached millions across Africa. The man was untouchable, unstoppable, a living legend. But here's what made everyone grin in jealousy. Pastor John hadn't always been this way. Just 3 years ago, he was nobody special. He pastored a small church of 50 members in a rented building. He drove an old Peugeot 504 that broke down every other week. His shoes had holes, his clothes were faded, and sometimes he couldn't afford to buy meat for his family. Then suddenly, boom, everything changed overnight. One Monday morning, construction trucks rolled into the village. Within 6 months, the most magnificent church building anyone had ever seen stood where an empty plot used to be. Pastor John appeared in Italian suits, Swiss watches, and shoes that cost more than most people's yearly salary. How did he do it? Whispered the jealous pastors from other churches. How did Brother John become this powerful so quickly? The young men in the village would point at his convoy of cars and say, "See, that's what I want to become. That's real success." The women would gossip at the market. "That Pastor John, he really knows how to touch heaven. Look how God is blessing him." But the wise elders would shake their heads and whisper among themselves, "No man rises from dust to diamond without paying a heavy price. Mark my word." Pastor John would only flash his $1,000,000 smile, adjust his gold chain, and declare to the cheering crowds, "When you serve God faithfully, He will promote you beyond your wildest dreams. The Lord is my provider." And the people would roar with applause, their eyes burning with hunger for the same success, the same wealth, the same power. If only they knew the terrible secret behind his overnight transformation. But Pastor John's greatest treasure wasn't his money, his fame, or his massive church. It was his daughter, Blessing. Oh, how that girl made her father's chest swell with pride. At 19 years old, Blessing was everything a father could dream of. She was beautiful, not just on the outside, but with the kind of inner beauty that made people stop and stare. Her smile could light up the darkest room. Her laugh was like music from heaven itself. Every parent in Lagos wanted their child to be like Blessing. She was the perfect daughter. She led the 1,000-voice choir with a voice so angelic that people said she must have learned to sing from the angels themselves. When she worshipped, grown men would weep. When she prayed, miracles happened. The youth loved her, the elderly adored her, and even the church's harshest critics had nothing but praise for Pastor John's daughter. "Pastor John," the church members would say, "you are truly blessed. Look at how well behaved your daughter is. Look at how she respects you. Look at how she serves God." And Pastor John would beam with pride. "Yes," he would say, "Blessing is my crown, my joy, my everything." She was studying mass communication at the University of Lagos, getting ready to take over the church's media ministry. Her Instagram followers numbered in the hundreds of thousands. Young people across Africa looked up to her as their role model. She spoke at conferences, appeared on television shows, and was being groomed to become the next generation of church leadership. Blessing never gave her father any trouble. She didn't drink alcohol, didn't smoke, didn't party with wild friends. Instead, she spent her free time visiting orphanages, feeding the homeless, and mentoring younger girls in the church. Daddy, she would tell Pastor John every night before bed, I'm so grateful for everything God has done for her family. I promise I will never do anything to embarrass you or bring shame to our ministry. Those words always made Pastor John's heart swell with love and pride, but they also made something else stir deep inside him. Something dark, something terrible, something he tried desperately to ignore. Because Pastor John knew something Blessing didn't know. He knew the real reason for their sudden wealth. He knew the price he had agreed to pay. He knew that one day the bill would come due. And when it did, he would have to make the most impossible choice any father could ever face. If this story is already gripping your heart like a vice, smash that subscribe button right now, because what you're about to hear next will leave you absolutely speechless. Then came that fateful Tuesday morning when everything began to fall apart. It was a Tuesday morning that started like any other. The sun rose over Lagos, painting the sky with golden streaks. The city came alive with its usual chaos. Cars honking, traders shouting, life moving at its frantic pace. But something was terribly wrong at the Miracle Harvest Church. Blessing's usual seat, in the front row, the special golden chair reserved for the pastor's daughter, sat empty. At first, nobody thought much of it. Maybe she was running late. Maybe she had an early morning class. Maybe she was preparing something special for the service. But as the minutes ticked by, the worry began to creep in like a slow poison. Has anyone seen Sister Blessing this morning? Asked Grace, the assistant choir director, her voice trembling with concern. The choir members looked at each other, shaking their heads. We thought she was with you, they replied. She wasn't at the 6 a.m. prayer meeting, whispered Brother Michael, the youth pastor. That's strange. She never misses morning prayers. The congregation began to murmur. Phones started buzzing as people called and texted, trying to reach their beloved pastor's daughter. But every call went straight to voicemail. Every text remained unread. When Pastor John finally took the podium, something was different about him. His usual confident smile seemed forced. His hands shook slightly as he gripped the microphone. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the air conditioning. Good morning, church family, he began, but his voice cracked halfway through the greeting. Where is Sister Blessing? Shouted someone from the back of the church. Pastor John's eyes darted around the room like an trapped animal. My daughter, she traveled yesterday evening. Very urgent matter, family business. But the explanation didn't make sense. Blessing never traveled without telling the church. She never missed services without notice. She never left without saying goodbye to her choir family, who loved her like blood sisters. Where did she travel to, Pastor? Asked Mama Janet, one of the church's founding members. Is everything all right? I said it's family business, Pastor John snapped, his voice sharp like a knife. Please, let us focus on today's service. The uncomfortable silence that followed was thick enough to cut with a machete. This wasn't the Pastor John they knew, the gentle, loving father who always spoke proudly about his daughter. After the service, the questions multiplied like raindrops in a storm. Did you see how Pastor John's hands were shaking? Did you notice he couldn't look anyone in the eye? Why didn't he tell us Blessing was traveling? Something is not right about this whole thing. The church's social media was flooded with messages. Where's our beloved Blessing? We miss you, sister. When are you coming back? But the posts remained unread. The calls remained unanswered. And Blessing Miracle remained missing. What the congregation didn't know was that as they sat in their golden pews that morning, asking innocent questions, Blessing was already 6 feet underground, still breathing, still calling for her daddy, still wondering why the man she trusted most in the world had betrayed her in the most unimaginable way. Brother Samuel had worked as a night security guard at Miracle Harvest Church for 8 years. He was a simple man, a retired school teacher who needed the extra money to feed his grandchildren. Everyone trusted Samuel. He was honest, reliable, and had never caused any trouble. But what Samuel witnessed 3 nights after Blessing's disappearance would haunt him for the rest of his life. It was 2 a.m. on a Friday night. The church compound was wrapped in darkness, save for the few security lights that cast long shadows across the grounds. Samuel was making his usual patrol rounds, his flashlight cutting through the blackness, when he heard something that made his blood freeze. Thud. Scrape. Thud. Scrape. The unmistakable sound of someone digging. Samuel's heart began to pound like a drum in his chest. Who would be digging in the church compound at this ungodly hour? His first thought was armed robbers trying to tunnel into the church vault where the offering money was kept. Quietly, Samuel crept toward the sound, his hand trembling as he gripped his flashlight. The digging was coming from behind the main church building, in the area where Pastor John had recently planted a small garden. What Samuel saw when he peeked around the corner shattered his mind into a million pieces. There was Pastor John, the man of God himself, frantically digging a hole with a shovel. His expensive suit was torn and covered in red earth. His face was streaked with sweat and tears. His eyes glowed with a madness that made Samuel's skin crawl. But that wasn't the most horrifying part. Next to the half-dug hole lay a wooden box, a coffin. And from inside that coffin came the weakest, most heartbreaking sound Samuel had ever heard. Daddy, please, I can't breathe. Daddy, help me. Why are you doing this to me? It was Blessing's voice, weak, terrified, barely alive. Samuel's legs turned to water. His whole body began to shake uncontrollably. The flashlight slipped from his trembling fingers and hit the ground with a loud clang. Pastor John spun around, his wild eyes locking onto Samuel's terrified face. For a moment, the two men stared at each other in absolute silence. Then Pastor John's voice cut through the night like a blade. You saw nothing, Samuel. Do you understand me? Nothing. Samuel nodded frantically, his voice trapped in his throat by pure terror. If you ever tell anyone about this, Pastor John continued, his voice now calm and deadly, I will make sure you and your entire family disappear. Do we understand each other? Yes, sir. Pastor, Samuel whispered, backing away slowly. Go home, Samuel. Take tomorrow off. In fact, take the whole week off. Here is your salary for the month. Pastor John pulled out a thick wad of cash and threw it at Samuel's feet. Remember, you saw nothing. Samuel grabbed the money and ran into the darkness, his heart hammering against his ribs like a caged bird desperate to escape. By the time he reached his house, he was sobbing uncontrollably. His wife found him on his doorstep, shaking and mumbling incoherently. Samuel, Samuel, what happened to you? She cried. But Samuel could only weep and repeat the same words over and over again. Blessing, poor Blessing. God forgive us all. From that night forward, Samuel couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't pray. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard her voice. Daddy, help me. Why are you doing this to me? But who would believe such an impossible story? Who would accept that Lagos's most beloved pastor had buried his own daughter alive? Samuel kept the terrible secret locked in his chest, where it ate at him like a cancer, slowly destroying his soul. For 3 months, Pastor John's lie held firm. Whenever anyone asked about Blessing, he would say she was studying abroad, that she was doing well, that she sent her love to the church family. He even showed fake photos on his phone, pictures he had stolen from other young women's social media accounts. Look, he would say, here's Blessing at her university in America. She's so happy. The congregation believed him because they wanted to believe him, because the alternative was too horrible to even imagine. But on a dark October night, when the rainy season was at its fiercest, heaven itself decided to expose Pastor John's evil deed. The storm came without warning. Lightning split the sky like angry fingers of God. Thunder roared with the voice of divine judgment. Rain poured down in sheets so thick you couldn't see 5 feet in front of you. The storm raged for 6 hours straight, flooding the streets of Lagos, turning roads into rivers, and washing away everything in its path. At Miracle Harvest Church, the beautiful gardens that Pastor John was so proud of became a muddy swamp. The carefully planted flowers were uprooted, the decorative stones scattered like marbles. But the worst damage was behind the main church building, where the red earth had been loosened by months of secrets and lies. When morning came and the storm finally passed, the church grounds looked like a war zone. Trees had fallen, windows were shattered, and debris was scattered everywhere. Brother Tony, the church's maintenance supervisor, arrived early to assess the damage. He walked around the compound with his clipboard, making notes of what needed to be repaired. When he reached the back of the church, he stopped dead in his tracks. There, where Pastor John's small garden used to be, the storm had washed away ninas of earth, revealing something that made Brother Tony's blood turn to ice. A wooden box was partially exposed, sticking out of the muddy ground like a grave marker. The wood was rotted and warped from months in the earth, and from the cracks in that box, something pale was visible. Brother Tony crept closer, his heart pounding like a war drum. When he saw what was inside that rotting coffin, he fell to his knees and vomited until there was nothing left in his stomach. It was Blessing, or what was left of her. Her beautiful face was now a skull. Her designer clothes had rotted away. Her fingers, those same fingers that had played the piano so beautifully, were nothing but bones. But the most horrifying detail was the position of her remains. Her fingers were clawed, as if she had been scratching at the coffin lid. Her mouth was open in what must have been an eternal scream. She had been buried alive. Brother Tony's screams brought other early arriving church members running. Soon, a crowd had gathered around the shallow grave, everyone staring in horror at the remains of the pastor's daughter they had loved so dearly. "Call the police," someone shouted. "Where is Pastor John?" cried another. "How could this happen?" wept the women. But Pastor John was nowhere to be found. He had fled in the night, leaving behind his mansion, his cars, his church, and his reputation. The news spread through Lagos like wildfire. By noon, every television station, every radio show, every newspaper was covering the story of the popular pastor who had murdered his own daughter. The headlines screamed, "Pastor buries daughter alive for ritual wealth." And in the comment sections, on the radio calling shows, in every conversation across Nigeria, people asked the same question: how could a father do such a thing to his own child?
Pastor John Miracle ran for 3 days and 3 nights. But you cannot run from your sins forever. They found him hiding in a cheap hotel in Benin Republic, trembling like a leaf in harmattan wind. His expensive clothes now dirty rags. His $1,000,000 smile replaced by the haunted look of a man who had sold his soul to the devil. When the Nigerian police dragged him back to Lagos in handcuffs, thousands of people lined the streets. They spat at him. They cursed him. They threw rotten tomatoes and stones at the police van. "Murderer," they screamed. "Child killer. Fake pastor." The same people who had once worshipped him, who had once begged for his blessing, who had once called him Daddy in the Lord, now wanted to tear him apart with their bare hands. At the police station, under the hot lights of the interrogation room, with cameras rolling and the whole nation watching, Pastor John finally broke down and told the truth that would destroy everything he had built. I didn't mean for it to happen like this," he sobbed, his voice cracking like a broken man. "I never wanted to hurt my daughter. I loved her more than life itself." "Then why did you do it?" demanded the police inspector. "Why did you bury your own child alive?" Pastor John's confession came out in broken fragments, each word more horrifying than the last. 3 years ago, I was nothing. Nobody. My church was failing. My daughter was about to drop out of university because I couldn't pay her fees, and I was drowning in debt. I felt like such a failure as a father, as a man, as a pastor. That's when they came to me, the cultists. They told me they could make me the most powerful pastor in Nigeria. They said I could have wealth beyond my wildest dreams, influence that would reach across Africa, a ministry that would make me famous worldwide. All they wanted was one thing: a blood sacrifice, the blood of someone I loved most in the world. I said no at first. I swore I would never do such a thing. But when I saw my daughter crying because she might have to leave school, when I saw the shame in her eyes because her father couldn't provide for her, I weakened. They gave me the ritual. They told me it had to be done at the full moon, that she had to be buried alive while calling my name, that her last breath had to be a prayer for my success. I drugged her evening meal. I told her we were going to pray together behind the church. When she fell unconscious, I put her in the coffin. I buried her while she was still breathing. The last thing I heard was her voice, weak and confused. "Daddy, I forgive you. I love you. Please let God bless our ministry." Even as she was dying, she was praying for my success. Even as I was murdering her, she still loved me. The confession room fell silent except for Pastor John's broken sobs. The police officer stared at him with disgust. The cameras captured every tear, every word, every moment of his complete destruction. Outside the police station, the crowd was screaming for justice. The church he had built was being torn down by angry hands. His mansion was set on fire. His cars were destroyed. His books were burnt in the streets. The Miracle Harvest Church, once the pride of Lagos, became a cursed ground where no grass will grow and no bird will sing. But the most tragic part of the whole story, the ritual had worked exactly as promised. Pastor John had indeed become the most famous pastor in Nigeria. His name was known across Africa and around the world. But instead of being famous for miracles and blessings, he became famous as the monster who murdered his own daughter for money and power. The spirits had kept their promise. They just hadn't told him what kind of fame he would receive. My dear viewers, this story teaches us that there are no shortcuts to success that don't demand a terrible price. Some prices are so high that even if you pay them, you lose everything that makes success worth having in the first place. If this story has touched your heart, if it has made you think about what truly matters in life, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Hit the subscribe button and join our storytellers family. And remember, the greatest wealth in the world is worthless if you have to destroy your soul to get it. Today, if you visit the place where Miracle Harvest Church once stood, you will find only empty land. Nothing grows there. No one builds there. The locals call it Blessings Ground, a reminder of the innocent girl who paid the price for her father's greed. Sometimes at night, people say they can still hear her voice on the wind, not angry or vengeful, but sad and loving. "Daddy, I forgive you, but the children of God should never sacrifice their loved ones for earthly treasures. Love is the only miracle worth having." And so, the story of Pastor John serves as a warning to all who hear it. A man who buries his own blood for wealth buries his humanity with it. And a soul that once sold can never be bought back.